Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, the cradle of civilization. We hear these phrases, we learn about the rise of agriculture and cities, but then history class kind of skips ahead. But what about the everyday things, the inventions we take for granted? The Mesopotamians didn't just invent civilization as a concept, they invented the tools that made civilization possible. This isn't a story about kings and conquests. This is about the things that made those kings powerful and those conquests logistically possible. It's about the surprisingly familiar inventions that emerged from this region thousands of years ago. Things we use today without a second thought, but which were revolutionary in their time. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, because we're about to go on a journey through time to uncover the forgotten inventions of ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine a world without writing. No books, no Twitter, no scribbled notes. That was life before the Mesopotamians. Around 3200 BC, they invented cuneiform. It began with clay tokens, symbols for objects. Pressed into clay, these became the first written records. Over time, the marks evolved, capturing sounds and ideas. Suddenly, history could be preserved and shared. Cuneiform was the big bang of communication. Next time you write or text, remember the Mesopotamians. We all know there are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. Ever wonder where that came from? It's not some arbitrary number, it's a legacy of the Mesopotamians' brilliant but slightly weird mathematical system, sexagesimal or base 60. See, while we're used to counting in tens, thanks fingers, the Mesopotamians went with 60. Why? Well, 60 has a lot of factors. You can divide it by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. That made it super useful for trade and calculations. And it wasn't just minutes and hours. Their understanding of base 60 also led to the 360-degree circle. This system, developed in ancient Mesopotamia, is still how we measure angles, time, and even geographic coordinates today. Think about that the next time you're staring at the clock or navigating with a compass. Those are echoes of ancient Mesopotamia, still ticking away in our modern world. Imagine a city skyline dominated by not skyscrapers, but by towering stepped pyramids reaching towards the heavens. These were the ziggurats, the most iconic architectural achievements of ancient Mesopotamia. Built from mud brick, these massive structures weren't just visually impressive, they were religious and social hubs. At their peak sat temples dedicated to the Mesopotamian gods, a physical representation of the connection between the heavens and the earth. But ziggurats were more than just temples. They served as administrative centers, storehouses for grain, and places of refuge during floods. They were a symbol of the city's power, wealth, and piety. While they may seem like relics of a distant past, the legacy of the ziggurat can be seen in our own time. From the stepped pyramids of the Mayans to the tiered design of some modern skyscrapers, the influence of this ancient architectural marvel is still felt today. Agriculture may not sound exciting, but it's what allowed humans to settle down and build civilizations in the first place. And the Mesopotamians, ever the innovators, took farming to a whole new level with the invention of the plow. Before the plow, planting crops was backbreaking work, literally. Farmers used handheld tools to till the soil, a slow and inefficient process. But then came the plow, a simple but revolutionary tool that used animal power to turn over the earth. This allowed farmers to plant more crops in less time with less effort. The result? Food surpluses, population growth, and the development of cities, all thanks to the humble plow. The next time you sit down to a meal, take a moment to appreciate the ingenuity of the Mesopotamians. They may not have invented food, but they invented the tool that made it possible to feed the world. Mesopotamia was nestled between two mighty rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. But these rivers weren't just sources of water, they were highways. And to navigate these highways, the Mesopotamians invented the sailboat. Now, these weren't the massive ships of later empires. These were smaller, simpler vessels, powered by the wind catching woven reed sails. But they allowed the Mesopotamians to transport goods and people up and down the rivers, connecting distant communities and fueling trade. This invention wasn't just about convenience, it was about connection. It facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture across long distances, laying the groundwork for the interconnected world we live in today. So, next time you see a sailboat gliding across the water, remember the Mesopotamians. They weren't just sailing the rivers, they were sailing into the future. We take pottery for granted. Cups, plates, bowls, they're just there. But in ancient Mesopotamia, pottery was a game changer, and it was all thanks to the invention of the pottery wheel. Before the wheel, pottery was made by hand, painstakingly shaping clay into vessels. But the pottery wheel revolutionized the process. By spinning the clay, potters could create perfectly symmetrical pots, jars, and bowls with incredible speed and precision. This meant more than just pretty dishes. Pottery was essential for storing food, transporting goods, and even brewing beer. The pottery wheel wasn't just an artistic tool, it was an engine of progress. The next time you reach for a mug of coffee, remember the Mesopotamians. They didn't just invent the cup, they invented the technology that made it possible. We like to think we live in a civilized society, but what does that actually mean? Part of it is having laws, a set of rules to maintain order. The Mesopotamians were among the first to develop written legal codes. One of the earliest was the Code of Ur-Nammu, from around 2100 BC. Some laws were harsh, but they established justice and order. Their legacy still shapes legal systems today. From the way we tell time to the laws we live by, the inventions of ancient Mesopotamia continue to shape our world in ways we rarely stop to consider. Their ingenuity and innovation laid the foundation for
In 1588, King Philip II of Spain launched the Spanish Armada, a mighty fleet of warships, against England. The Armada's failure had far-reaching consequences, shaping the destinies of both Spain and England. The fleet, comprising over 130 ships, carried thousands of soldiers and sailors. Their mission was to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I, a Protestant monarch who defied Spain's Catholic authority. The fate of England, and indeed of Europe, hung in the balance. The Spanish ships, large and heavily armed, sailed in a crescent formation, a formidable display of naval power. However, the English were prepared to defend their shores, and the stage was set for a clash of titans. The Armada's failure was due to a combination of strategic miscalculations, fierce English resistance, and the unpredictable fury of the sea. King Philip II of Spain believed in the overwhelming power of his Armada. His plan was simple but ambitious: to crush the English fleet with sheer force. The Spanish ships, larger and more numerous, would engage the English in close combat, boarding their vessels and overwhelming them with superior numbers. The Armada was to clear a path for the Duke of Parma's army, stationed in Flanders, to cross the English Channel and land on English soil. The Spanish Armada was a formidable force, but it had its weaknesses. The ships, designed for Mediterranean warfare, were high-sided and cumbersome, making them less maneuverable in the rough waters of the English Channel. Their reliance on close-quarters combat proved to be a disadvantage against the faster and more agile English ships. This lack of flexibility would prove costly in the face of the English's unorthodox tactics and the unpredictable nature of naval warfare. The English, outnumbered but determined, adopted a different approach. Their ships, smaller and faster than the Spanish galleons, were designed for speed and maneuverability. They relied on long-range artillery fire, keeping a safe distance from the Spanish ships and exploiting their superior firepower. The English tactics were based on harassing the Spanish fleet, disrupting their formation, and picking off individual ships. They employed fire ships, vessels filled with explosives, to sow chaos and panic among the Spanish ranks. The English gunners, more skilled and experienced than their Spanish counterparts, inflicted heavy casualties on the Spanish ships and crews. The English leadership, under the joint command of Lord Howard of Effingham and Sir Francis Drake, was instrumental in their success. Drake, a seasoned privateer, brought his experience in unconventional warfare to the fight. The English seamen, inspired by their leaders and determined to protect their homeland, fought with unmatched courage and tenacity. The weather played a crucial role in the Armada's demise. Strong southwesterly winds hampered the Spanish fleet's progress, pushing them up the English Channel and preventing them from rendezvousing with the Duke of Parma's army in Flanders. The English Channel, notorious for its unpredictable weather patterns, proved to be a formidable ally to the English. The storms that battered the Spanish Armada scattered their ships, inflicting damage and casualties. The Spanish, accustomed to the calmer waters of the Mediterranean, struggled to maintain their formation and control their vessels in the rough seas. The adverse weather also hindered the Spanish communication and coordination. In contrast, the English ships, smaller and more maneuverable, weathered the storms better. The storms, while a challenge to both sides, ultimately tipped the balance in favor of the English. The first major engagement, the Battle of Plymouth, set the tone for the campaign. The English ships, utilizing their superior speed and firepower, harassed the Spanish fleet, inflicting damage while avoiding close-quarters combat. The Spanish, unable to bring their superior numbers to bear, were forced to retreat. The Battle of Portland, another significant clash, further demonstrated the effectiveness of English tactics. The English ships, sailing in a crescent formation, unleashed a devastating barrage of cannon fire on the Spanish, crippling several ships and disrupting their formation. The Spanish, struggling to maintain their cohesion, were gradually worn down by the relentless English attacks. The Battle of Gravelines, fought off the coast of Flanders, proved to be the decisive encounter. The English, employing fireships to sow panic among the Spanish fleet, launched a furious assault, inflicting heavy casualties and scattering the Spanish ships. The Armada, battered, demoralized, and running low on supplies, was forced to abandon its mission and seek a route back to Spain. The Armada's return journey was a harrowing ordeal. Battered by storms, short on supplies, and harassed by English ships, the Spanish fleet limped back across the North Atlantic, a shadow of its former glory. Many ships, damaged in battle or wrecked by storms, were lost along the Irish coast. The survivors, exhausted and demoralized, straggled back to Spain, bringing with them tales of defeat and disaster. The once mighty Armada, a symbol of Spanish power, had been humbled by the English and the unforgiving sea. The Armada's defeat was a crushing blow to Spain's prestige and ambitions. It marked the beginning of the decline of Spanish naval power and ushered in an era of English naval dominance. The victory boosted English morale and national pride, solidifying Queen Elizabeth's rule and establishing England as a major European power. The defeat of the Spanish Armada had profound consequences for both Spain and England. For Spain, it marked the beginning of its decline as a global superpower. The loss of so many ships and experienced sailors dealt a severe blow to the Spanish Navy, from which it would never fully recover. The financial cost of the enterprise also placed a heavy strain on the Spanish treasury, contributing to its economic woes. For England, the victory over the Armada was a defining moment in its history. It confirmed England's status as a major naval power and boosted English morale and national pride. The victory also secured England's independence from Spain and allowed it to pursue its own ambitions on the world stage. The defeat of the Armada also had significant religious implications. Spain, a staunchly Catholic nation, had sought to depose Queen Elizabeth I, a Protestant monarch, and restore Catholicism to England. The English victory helped to safeguard Protestantism in England and gave hope to Protestant movements elsewhere in Europe.